helmets on or off?
What?
Helmets on or off?
Off. Hold them in your hand. Yes. All right.
Is he riding too?
Yeah, he's gonna ride this little buggy once we
Oh.
when we get out of Atlanta. We're gonna.
Somebody have one? Well, good morning, everyone. I said, good morning, everyone. I'm not awake, but you all need to wake up and get us all ready to start counting. And the whole purpose of this gathering is to let everybody in Georgia and Alabama and where else? South Carolina?
South Carolina, even some from
And
Arkansas.
Arkansas. Well, the whole Southeast. Let everybody know. That's Southeast. Last time I remembered. But to let everybody in this region know that they really do count. I don't know about you, but I look around and almost everything we do here lately, we undercount. We had a very happy undercount about a week or so ago. We were prepared for about 100,000 people to come into underground. And the first night, people prepared for 100,000 ran out of beer. And that's the moral of that story is, if you don't get counted, you don't get your beer. And so the next day, we figured we had 150,000 the next day, the first day, and it was raining. So they figured that probably it continued to pour down rain. They wouldn't have any more than 50, figured they'd be lucky to get 50,000. They ended up with, again, over 100,000. And over again, the biggest problem we've been having in underground is getting the count right. And that's a happy problem when you're in business, because most of those people who are in business, many of them in business for the first time, made enough money in the first weekend to pay off their investment. So from here on, it's nothing but profit. And that's, I think, a lesson for the census. If we get the count right, there's nothing but profit, because almost everything we do and everything we have to relate to in cities, things like the Free Lunch Act, revenue sharing, Public Works and Economic Development, Manpower Development and Training Act, Public Health Service Act, Federal Aid to Highways Act, I said the National School Lunch Act, the Economic Opportunity Act, the Higher Education Facilities Act, the Vocational Education Act, the National Housing Act, the Housing and Urban Development Act, the Appalachian Regional Development Act. And when I call those names, you know that each one of those names means money to our cities and our counties and our states. And I always tell people that that's what politics is all about. Politics is about dividing up the money. Everybody's in politics. The IRS will find you. Whether we count you or not, the IRS will find you, and you do pay taxes. Or if you buy a bar of candy as a 6-year-old, you're going to pay some Georgia sales tax. So the tax man gets your money. What we're trying to do through the census is make sure that you get the appropriate share of your money back. But if the tax man counts you and takes your money, and we don't count you, you don't get your share. And that's the simple message of this meeting. How to make sure that everybody gets their share, their rightful share. Now we know traditionally that we have undercounted the census, well, for about 1.4% of the population was the total undercount. But 5.9% of the minority population was undercounted. And it's estimated that as many as 8.8% of the black males between the ages of 18 and 34 were not counted. And so you see how that undercount disproportionately affects the people who need to get some money most. And when you ask people, why are you so poor in such a rich country? Occasionally the answer might be, well, I wasn't counted when they were giving out the money. And we don't want that to happen after 1990. We want the 1990 census to be the best and most accurate accounting of the population of the United States of America that we can muster. And we want to count people who are migrant workers. We want to count people who are homeless. We want to count people who are here in school, people who are just drifters. We want to count the kind of folk that sneaked in here into Atlanta and are living illegally in a public housing project, you know, and they're not all black, and they're not all white. That's almost the American way. Everybody, when they come to town first, they live with somebody they know until they can get on their feet. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Families help each other that way. And in the course of my time in the house, almost every time I turn around, somebody's calling me and saying, look, my nephew's coming, or your cousin is coming, or a friend of my brother-in-law, and he wants to find a job in Atlanta. Can you let him, you got an extra bed for a few days. Well, we want to count all those extra beds. And we want to let people know that counting the extra beds and counting the people who are sleeping on the floor does not affect their status. It doesn't affect their status in public housing, if that's their public housing, that the information on the census is the most sacred and private information that any government can collect. And this is better than talking to your psychiatrist or your preacher. That nobody is going to know the kind of data that you share. But we've got to make people feel comfortable with the census, and that's the reason we have invited distinguished elected officials. We've invited people from agencies, people who are involved in the various numbers games that we in government have to play. The city clerks, the folk that keep up the count. And that's who you are, and we need your help to make sure that we get the best possible count. Now, to assure us of our account and to make sure that we have all of the resources that Washington can provide to get that account, we have the chief of the 1990 Census Redistricting Data Office. He's a native of this region from Gastonia, North Carolina. 25 years at the Census Bureau in Washington, and working with elected officials on the use of census data for redistricting and federal grants programs. He designed 1980 census forms, and he managed the introduction of laser discs at the Census Bureau. That's another thing. We'll probably have the best technology available in this count. And so we've got every possibility to make it right. The city of Atlanta is really pleased to be able to host the United States Census Bureau. And we have in this region one of 20 meetings pulling people together from Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. And we've got about 180 people who are mayors, city clerks, community leaders who will participate in helping the census in 1990 get the most accurate count we've ever had in the history of American census. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Marshall Turner, who is the district director, to come forward and respond to any of your concerns and questions and make a statement.
Thank you very much, Mayor Young. On behalf of the Census Bureau, I want to thank you, the media, who carry out your duties here in Atlanta, and especially the mayor and the city for being so willing to host what we see as a key meeting for making sure that the bicentennial census of this nation goes into the records as the best the census has ever conducted. And we feel very encouraged by the participation and the support that we have received in the Atlanta region already in preparing for this meeting, and quite frankly, for all the other meetings that we've had throughout the country. There has been an outpouring of support from elected and appointed officials at all levels of government. If I may, I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Mr. Roland Moore, who is the Associate Director of the Census Bureau and on whose shoulders rests the field network of 12 regional offices and a task force next spring of 300,000 temporary census workers who will fan out to make sure that everyone is counted, in addition to the more traditional means of collecting census data through the mail system. Also to my left, Mr. James Holmes, who directs the Atlanta Regional Office, one of 12 nationally currently. $30 billion in federal grants alone are targeted and directed to those 39,000 governments across the country every year. In addition to that, the results of the numbers will be used for preparing congressional districts, Georgia legislative districts, and city and county districts throughout this region. And the boundaries of those districts will last until the next millennium, till the 21st century. So I think those facts alone speak for the importance and why we see such a significant turnout here today at the largest of the meetings we have held so far. Yeah.
Was your office where it started?
In our main offices, yes, the Bureau, wholesale sales representatives.
And I understand it was a lady was putting in a fuse and the fuse box. A lady was putting in a fuse and the fuse box exploded, is what I hear.
That's exactly what our understanding is. We had lost our current about a half hour before, and apparently he was trying to replace a fuse without cutting the power.
A lady was putting in a fuse and the fuse box exploded, is what I hear.
That's exactly what our understanding is. We had lost our current about a half hour before, and apparently he was trying to replace a fuse without cutting the power. Unbelievable explosions. I've never even heard lightning hitting a house that could even match that. I mean, it was beyond belief. Tremendous.
Well, it looks like they've got things pretty much under control in the back.
All right, you remember Eudora Rogers?
Oh,
Her
yeah,
office
sure.
is at the other end of my hall, and she and Sherwin would have. Sherwin was out here, but I don't know how she is.
Okay.
We were totally cut off. But I appreciate you coming down and.
Well, the fire department really did a heroic job, and I think the message was that if people just hadn't panicked, and if we can just get people to stay in place until the fire department can get things under control, we could have saved a few more people perhaps, but
you know
I
what
think...
our greatest problem was? To get somebody to pull the fire alarm. We broke that office window of mine, and we yelled. Yelled and yelled, and finally a man, people stood and watched, but they wouldn't go to the firebox, and it's right there on the corner, and finally a gentleman did. But probably what seemed like an eternity was only a matter of moments. But again, we want to thank you for coming out. And
thank you. And
thank you so much.
there are about 100 totally exhausted firemen back there, and they're taking a half-hour break. There's another crew in, and when they come out, those that are resting now will go. But it was really a heroic effort on their part, and I think we couldn't have asked for more cooperation from anybody.
We quite agree with you. Thank you.
Good. Very good.
Can we get your name, please, ma'am?
My name is Dot Bissell, Bissell.
I was going around the back of the fireman, and I'll come right back and go up with you.
Rescue, fire. I need 2 body bags. Anybody got any body bags? Yeah. Wait a minute. We'll get them for you. Is that Gatorade?
Competition weekly all the time.
Are you still going to go in?
I don't know.
All the units that have been had any work done on them in the last 4 or 5 years, they had smoke detectors.
In the cars?
Yeah.
The building was probably built around 1963 or 4, as I recall.
This is a Liberty Mutual building, a 10-story building, constructed in 1962, a non-sprinkler building, no sprinklers within the building. They received a permit in May for electrical work. That electrical work was in progress, being done by Thompson & Thompson Electrical Company. They were replacing switches and fixtures. That's all we know at this point. The city inspector is on the way to the scene now.
They're replacing what?
Switches and fixtures.
Is that believed to be involved in the cause of the fire?
Well, there was a fuse. The fire was started by a fuse that they were replacing, so apparently it has some connection.
Any update on
Word
fatalities?
on the fatalities or injuries?
At this point, confirmed already at the hospital of 4. We believe 2 more bodies are coming out of the building in a few minutes.
Do you know where they're coming out?
Once again, the building.
Tom.
What person was resuscitated? The person that you initially
This was the 5th person that we thought was dead.
How many at Grady?
4 at Grady.
Which hospital was the 5th going to?
You could have electrical arc.
I don't know. They didn't know. They said she was resuscitated.